I should say, welcome to Open to Connect. It actually has a name, this whole effort that I'm doing. But today we have Brandon Johnakin, and he is someone I met through LinkedIn, through mentorship, other people. It was one of those where when you comment on someone's stuff, then people see you and then you get connected. So one of the things I just gravitated towards Brandon was he had this amazing layoff story. And when he volunteered to share it, I was like, let's do it. So Brandon, do you want to tell a little bit about what you do now? And I'm curious just to, you can tell a little bit about yourself too, because I know you have a kiddo and all those things.
Yeah.
That's part of your layoff story, but we'll jump into the conversation. Yeah.
For sure. Hey, everybody. So I'm Brandon. Right now I work with Truist, a financial firm. I'm on the technology side where we work on iOS and Android, or I support iOS and Android platforms, and recently Microsoft as well, but we work on the mobile apps for our banking customers. So I've been doing that with them for, at this point, 7 months now. And as Jacqueline mentioned, during the layoff period, I just had a kiddo. So it was like a time for sure. But as far as technology is concerned, I've, for the most part, been in that industry, or really financial technology, for about 4.5 years now.
Okay. And then I would love to jump in. You had so much insight when we met before, just straight to that layoff story. Did you have any indication that it might even be coming, or were you blindsided completely?
It was like a blindside and not a blindside at the same time. I think what it really came down to was how well you paid attention to the people around you in the office. You would hear like little chatters here and there. So I want to say sometime around March, it was like, I hear chatter, but people are also saying, no, you're going to be safe. You're going to be safe. But you never know. So for me, it was like, in case this happens, let me start trying to work on certain licenses that I've been wanting to get. Let me also renew the things that I need to renew while I'm still here, if I get impacted. And then when the layoff happened, at the time it was announced, I wasn't really too surprised.
Okay, great. Sorry, we were having just a little bit of, somebody was asking if the session has started yet, and it has. So I want to reply real quick.
Yeah.
Anyway, this is the joy of live. A lot of learning every single time. So yeah, here we go. I hope that Pamela does get to see that happening. So I can relate a lot on the watching the, because it's kind of like, do you want to pay attention so much to office politics or the words on the ground or murmurs on the ground, or try and ignore it and just do your best? So did you feel like if you kind of started hearing the whispers of a layoff coming, that you found yourself changing your behavior and as far as how you worked, or more stress showing up around what you were doing?
Not really, because so the way I looked at it, it wasn't in my control. So I didn't feel the need to like stress out about it. I was like, the day, tomorrow's still going to come. Yeah. So my job is to just focus on what I have in front of me. And then if I happen to be one of the ones that's impacted by it, I'll process it and then figure out what I need to do after that. But around that time period, there was a definite high level of stress amongst my peers in the office. So I just tried to make sure I didn't fall into that same suit.
I have to admit that before my own layoff, that I totally fell into that. It's coming. And I didn't want to be like the crying wolf if it never did show up, but it was definitely in the back of my mind and affected how I was working and the stress level I was on. So very good that didn't happen to you. So what did happen as far as the layoff story? Because I know you have such a, as far as your we named it growth, grind, and a comeback, because you went through so much. So talk us through just the right after the layoff. I know you had a new baby showing up, and then some of the first steps you took to get started on overcoming it.
For me, after we got the news, it came in a little email, and you saw the invite on your calendar for Zoom or Teams, a little 15-minute spot that lasted for about 5 minutes, and then after that, it was you can take the rest of the day to yourself. Literally, the day that I found out that I was being laid off, when I took the rest of the day, I was immediately applying for jobs or tapping into my network. But then also, it's like, let me tap into my resume. And for us, like our daughter was about 4 months at the time. So I had a whole bunch of things going through my mind. Like, all right, we just had a little kid. Now I'm thinking about finances. We have a pretty big house and stuff, so everything's expensive. kids are very expensive, and at the time we did not know how expensive they were. So I did have those stressors going on, but also at the same time, in the back of my mind, it was, well, I know I can do these things while I'm able to do it in terms of updating my resume, building my network, and working on my skills and stuff like that. And funny enough, I didn't use LinkedIn like that when I was like employed. I think I had like somewhere between 95 to 100 connections, and then within that day, that number jumped up to about 500, and then it just kept jumping up because I was very intentional about, okay, I got to build this up if I'm going to use this platform, because this is likely going to be the way that I find my next employment opportunity.
I love that. So when you said before the layoff, or right when the layoff happened, you were leaning into your network, but at the same time, you had a smaller network to work with, right? So, So how did you go from the 100 to 500? Were you reaching out, or did you do I actually want to call it a magic post or something where people from your network started elevating it?
So I was kind of a pest. So I had a lot of connections within my company. I connected with them first, so that took the number up quite a bit. But then I started researching like all the places that I wanted to go to, and I had a pretty extensive list, but I leveled it first to my top 5. And then I just started connecting to people within the top 5. I would send personalized messages. And if I got a connection back, great. If I didn't, I was going to try again anyway. But the thing about a lot of these companies, there are a lot of people that work at all of them. So if I could just pull at least 1 or 2 people, maybe 3 from each place that I want to go to, then eventually that'll start helping me out. And then I would just engage with their posts. That would look like reposting things or leaving comments. And then leaving the comment would lead to another conversation. So I would do things like that. Never had anybody share my profile. Probably should have. It might have helped out, but never had anybody share their profile for me. For me, it was all just the grind of, all right, these are the steps that I know I have to take. It's still new to me, but I'm gonna go ahead and just, shoot for the win here.
Yeah, I really like that. Especially you hit on some of the points that I talk about a lot. And one of them is finding people and then interacting with what they're posting. And you do that exceptionally well. I felt like I knew who you were just from how many times you posted on somebody in my network's post, not even my own. It was just like, oh, he's posting on Shanae's post over there again. And then your name just kind of went into that. Oh, I would help this guy with anything because he's active. He's here. He's engaged. He's professional, all the things that
thank you
I would point to people to do.
I was aggressive about that. I had a whole strategy about that after a while, once I started realizing like I shared with you the Shanae strategy because she was someone I really wanted to connect with. And I was like, I think I forget the way I worded it, but I know I sent her a message and it didn't get responded, and I didn't trip out about it because of she's a recruiter. I understand how that works. But then I just started doing research. I engaged in her post, and then it was like, oh, I found a podcast about you on YouTube. Okay, this is why you didn't respond back, because I didn't do it the right way. So, now I have to get very surgical and strategic about how I can connect with you. And ultimately my strategy worked. So I was really excited about that. But even then with going into the layoff, the one thing that I didn't want to do when I tried to connect with recruiters, especially, was to ask them for hey, can you help me in terms of this job, or can you help me in terms of that? Because from what I was seeing and hearing from my peers, when they were doing that, they weren't really getting responses like that. So my approach was a little bit different. I've always been a good writer. So for me, it was like, I can write my own resume, but I would love for it if you can just if you have the time, you can just take a look at it and review it. And based off of the candidates that you usually pass through and screen, what are some of the things that you've seen them be successful with that I could apply to mine if I don't have it? And then I'll take care of the rest. So that's how, my recruiter network kind of got bigger. I reached out to a lot of recruiters at all sorts of places and just wanted to kind of, gauge and fish and see what's out there. But it was all about their approach and how I had to approach it the correct way.
Yeah, I love that. And we get in the mentorship call that I do, we have so many people that come in and are like, I'm just not getting traction. I don't know what I'm doing wrong. And we do mention, often it's a numbers game too. So how many times do you feel like you reached out before you had anybody that said they would look at your resume?
So I would say maybe the third time I reached out, I got somebody that said that they could reach out. I think they worked at Lenovo at the time. Now the biggest challenge though, I found that it was a little bit easier to get them to respond, but it was harder to get the commitment from it, which I was okay with, because at the end of the day, I'm probably like one of who knows how many people reaching out to you. So it would be very entitled of me to catch an attitude because you didn't respond and stuff like that. So I wouldn't stress about it too much. But I've had people from Microsoft, SAS, Lenovo, Red Hat, IBM, a lot of big name companies who were able to get back to me. And I just remain patient within that time period, because I understand they also had busy schedules as well. So there would be times where it's like, yeah, I'll be more than happy to help you out. And then a week goes by and you don't hear anything. And, I'm not tripping because I'm talking to another recruiter and then I get the feedback from them. So I think that was just patience was just a huge part of it. And I know when you're going through a layoff, that can be very challenging, because it feels like you have to find something so fast, or you have to find something to feel secure. And even though I was dealing with those things, I was still trying to make sure, like, hey, if I can remain patient, then something's going to work out at the end of the day. The patience will pay it forward.
Mm-hmm. And then I know you, so latching on to that story about the resume, you tweaked it so much. So one of the things I hear often is, if you ask 100 people for an opinion on your resume, you'll get 100 different answers. And sometimes that can even get overwhelming in your own head. How did you land on something that you felt good about and started getting traction?
That's a great question, because I heard from so many different recruiters. All of them were saying different things. It was getting a little frustrating at times, because I'm like, man, this recruiter just said this out, my resume was fire. Now you're saying this, and you're like, I tweaked this. So it got to a point where I kind of just was like, all right, it's all really subjective. So I'm going to make what I feel like works for me, but I'm still going to take everything that you say into consideration. And then I just created, I think at the time I made about 6 or 7 templates. And a good friend of mine, she was also a mentor, her name is Alyssa. She would tell me, I saw your resume when you were laid off. And I see it now a month later. And I'm just like, whoa, you've been really grinding after it. And it took a lot of research too, to get to it. So I had got to a point where, all of my resumes are very simple. And I found like the simple ones seem to have worked the most. And my most simplest ones were the ones that got me the most traction when it came to interviewing. So I always had a confidence that you'll get to an interview. It'll happen eventually. It's a tough job market. So now how can you make your resume stand out? And that was a huge stressor point for me too, because I know that there's other people who are much more qualified than me, but I was still somehow able to find ways to get past whatever ATS systems are there, or my resume caught the eye of a recruiter or a hiring manager. So yeah, at that time it was definitely tough, because I felt like, man, I can't do anything, because I have to keep updating it every time. And then there would be some periods where I could be having a great day, a casual day, hanging out with my family. Then all of a sudden I'm like, oh, Google Docs, I just thought about this. Let me update my resume real quick. Or I would see something new. And I think what ultimately helped me get to a resume that I was comfortable with was because I've seen so many other people's resumes. And then in my thought process, it was like, okay, well, this works for me. I see what works for you all. I'm going to stick with what works for me though. And what's been working for me has been allowing me the opportunity to get the interviews that I've been hoping to get, and things like that. So it did take a little while before I got comfortable with my resume.
Okay. So when you said you went, did I break up a little bit? Okay. I think I'm okay. When you said you went simple or simpler, I've noticed, I saw someone's LinkedIn profile and they kind of just gave me complete pause in a good way, because they really were like, this is the company I worked for, and this is an impact statement, allowing the person looking at the profile to fill in the blanks of the tasks they did. So would you say you started moving more into a direction like that when you went simpler?
Yeah, I found, and I do this as well for like, if someone comes to me and they ask me to write their resume for, or at least like proof it. One of the things that I did for mine, it was almost like an imposter syndrome at first, because I knew, like, even though I was in financial technology, I wanted to get to like the technology, like the Microsofts of the world and stuff and whatnot. So I felt like I had to, as my little cousin would say, big up my language to a degree. But then after a while, I was like, I don't really feel that's not me. So I just started simplifying everything. Still found a way to show impact. My resume doesn't have too much on it. And when I write for others, I tell them, hey, I'm not going to put any type of fluff in there, because I think just from experience, recruiters can catch on to that. So I would write something for you that everything that you give me, I'm going to write it out. I'm just going to do it in a more direct, impactful way that still uses the format that is often talked about, like the XYZ formula, stuff like that. That's often talked about from hiring managers or recruiters. So for me, simplicity was key. And when it came to like my LinkedIn profile, I try to make it as simple as possible in terms of the content that was there, and just left it at that. So the templates that I've made for myself, depending on the industry that I was going for, they work for that industry. But for my specific goals of what I was trying to do, simplicity was just the best way to go for it.
I really love that. It gave me so much to think about, especially because I was laid off myself and I have a resume actually being reviewed right now. So in that world of, okay, what do I do and how do you simplify it and where do you put fluff and where do you not, and then trying to condense it into a small 1 to 2, how do you summarize a busy work world in 1 to 2 pages where you feel like you were always delivering something?
It was such a challenge at the time. I want to say I spent maybe throughout the 9-month layoff, I probably spent 3 months of it dedicating it to like resume research and whatnot in between the job search. So, and I think what made me want to like lead more towards a simpler resume was, when I was laid off, they gave us a service that we could use as part of our severance where, you have a resume writing company and they go through and proof it. And I went through that with them just to kind of see how it was. And then when I saw the resume they used, I was like, well, hold up. Red flag. I've seen this resume used from other people and they say that it doesn't work. So, and this is very complex. So I don't know if I want to use that, but I tested it out and it was almost an immediate rejection everywhere I went. So it made me kind of question myself, like, man, am I good enough because this isn't working? And then, so I just started kind of, I took a risk on myself of, hey, maybe what will it look like if you write it out yourself? You think you can do a better job than that. Let's test it. I've seen my peers, they've had similar resumes and they would always say they weren't really getting that much traction, which made the layoff that much more difficult. And as someone who's been there, I was like, yeah, trust me, I get it. I think at this point, I used to feel so bad and my friend would laugh at me because I would have resume number 7. Okay. Resume number 15. This is resume number 31, and I would just resume tests 37, stuff like that until I found like something that worked for me.
That's a great idea because I'd often put dates on mine, but then that actually still requires me thinking, because I would get into is there another one in between somewhere that I put in a different folder that I forgot that I put it in the folder, and what job is this tailored to? And I would love for you to talk a little bit about how much you tailored the resume, or because of its simple format, did it lend to the less need for tailoring?
I think so for me, it depended on the type of company I worked for. For instance, like Microsoft was a huge goal of mine. And I'm happy to say that I was able to interview with them once. And for me, depending on the company I applied for, if I saw what their application process looked like, for instance, like Workday or Greenhouse or any one of those ATS systems, then I would use a specific format for that. But when it came to like condensing everything, a big part of that, I like to say I'm a nerd. So I like to say ChatGPT is like Jarvis and I'm Tony Stark. So there's a certain way you can prompt it. And when it comes to, so this is a little trade secret for me. One of the prompts that I use to tailor resumes, I'll have ChatGPT or Copilot or Claude, any one of them. I'll take the job description, everything that I'll see there, I'll copy and paste the job description in there and I'll ask it sometime, depending on what my goal is, I'll ask it to pinpoint all of the preferred qualifications and all of the regular qualifications first, and then break down what the main thing that this job application is asking for. Then I will take my resume and copy and paste just the body, and I will ask it from 0 to 100%, what percentage of my resume matches to this job description. And if I got anything less than a 70%, then I knew I needed to tweak the resume to get it to somewhere between anywhere from 85 to 93%. And then I found that if I got it from 85 to 93%, if I applied to the role, I had a really good chance of the role, like my application being under review, the status would change. And I was a stickler for watching those statuses. I would always check to see. So I would see it in under review. Then I would, a few days later, get a call from like an interview, like a recruiter or something along those lines. So following those prompts helped me out to an extent because it allowed me to tailor my resume specifically, and not necessarily. And when I say tailor, it's not like using the buzzwords all the time. And I know it's easy to do that, but it was mostly, tailoring it to what it is that they're asking for in the job description itself. If I can speak to that during an interview and confidently at the very least and show I could solve this for you, then that helps me go a long way.
I love that prompt, because what I've done before is taking my resume, taking the job description, and asking it to do something like write a cover letter or tweak the resume bullets for it. But I really like how you ask it to rank where your resume fits that job description. That's exceedingly clever.
Yeah.
And I think, I was going to ask you, did you use AI in the job search? Since there's some people are like, I can't use it, and other people, even recruiters I see all the time, is just use AI. Everybody's using it. Just use it.
It helps. I use it not necessarily in the job search, but when it came to trying to figure out ways to stand out, I did on certain things. But most of the prompting was just to see how well I aligned up with the job. So like, for instance, I saw a position once where I was like, oh, I can do that. That's real easy. I feel like I align up to it. And I put that prompt in, and it said my resume was a 50% match. And then after that, I started second guessing a little bit. And then I was like, well, okay, this causes me to now think deeper about my resume and the things that I do. Like, for instance, earlier I mentioned how I work with teams that we support iOS and Android and Microsoft. And I just had this conversation a few days ago with my friend, Andrea, and I told her I never thought it was a big deal. So it wasn't on my resume. And sure enough, a lot of people thought it was a big deal. So I put it on my resume. And when I when I go through that same job that I saw, when I ask it, what's the percentage, it jumped it from a 50 to a 78. And I was like, okay, that's a big deal. But sometimes it causes you to think differently about the content that's in your resume. You might have missed something. I missed what was a key component that probably could have helped me out a while ago, so it causes you to think a little bit differently when you're tweaking it. For me, it made it fun because I kind of felt like I wasn't necessarily alone throughout the process. Even though it's just like a AI platform, I try to use it in a way where it's like, okay, you're in this with me. You're like my assistant to a degree. So how can I get this 50% to anywhere, at least 80 to 85 or 90? And I would be satisfied with that. I don't think we're ever going to find a perfect 100% match to a job description. So I was always comfortable with anywhere from 80 to 90.
Yeah, I love that. I also, you did highlight the point of not just regurgitating the keywords on the job description. And I've even heard from recruiters, often they'll post that doesn't actually help because we want to see where you made it look. I think, what did they call it? The like keyword dive or something like that, where it's just literally, okay, they're trying to get me to look at the, have it flag the searching. So it pops up. So I like that you really,
that was trial and error. Resume number 15 had a lot of keywords in there. There was a lot of like, hey, ChatGPT identified. So I wanted to be in program management. So for me, it was, or like technical program management. So for me, it was at ChatGPT, identify the most common keywords that you find in these types of roles. Where do those align with my resume? If they're not already in there, can you add them to where it makes sense in the resume if I happen to be missing the language? And then from there, it is spit out whatever input it's in. Then I would ask, do you find this to be valuable at this particular company, Also, depending on the type of company, I would have it say something along the lines of identify the values of this company and see if any of those values are reflected within my resume also. Because if it's a company that I really want to go to, then I want to make sure that I can also adhere to the values, because I have my own values that generally, I think most companies generally have the same type of values. So, coming from my previous job, I align with a lot of those values. So it was just a matter of, except my resume spoke to that language as opposed to the language of like Microsoft or like SAS or something like that. So it was a lot of tweaking. And that's what I mean, like, 2 to 3 months of just deep diving into AI, deep diving into resume writing and all that. And it got to a point where now if somebody was to share their resume to me, I can almost immediately say or tell, like, you use AI to work on it. And I might even be able to identify which system you used at this point. But it made the whole thing worthwhile in the end.
thank you for sharing all of those. It's really it's challenging the way I look at AI, and I would like to talk about things that people are doing, especially with what you just said on the okay, I can spot it a mile away that you used AI to do this. And I hear from recruiters that often, or even hiring managers, if they get to a final round interview, that they said they could do these things, but they weren't able to support it in the interview. So I would love for you to talk about some of the things that you see that are kind of okay, this is a red flag. Maybe they can't actually do the job and they're trying to circumvent the system.
Yeah. So like, I feel like it's a common thing too, because we all want to be able to stand out when we're going through a layoff. And I've had a few peers who were going through the layoff with me. They would ask me, hey, can you review my resume? I'm like, sure, more than happy to. So I would go through, I would look at the resume, read through the content, and then I would ask them. I like to ask questions. So I would just go through and I'd ask them, hey, did you use AI for this? They're like, yeah, I did. And I told them the reason why I can tell you used it in the way that you did is you took out, like, your resume doesn't have any humanity in it at all. And I think that's one thing that you can see. So like when I write mine, yes, AI is like spitting out the things that I'm inputting it to, but then I take it myself and then humanize it to where it sounds like me, because I'm the one that's doing this. I'm going to have to be the one to speak to this when it comes time to an interview. And I've had a few peers where they might have used ChatGPT to write their whole resume and they use that to apply. And then when you get into an interview and they start asking you questions, your resume might have had some type of language that you've never even said before or that you're familiar with. And they're asking you specific questions about it. And now you're like, I can't speak to it confidently. So for me, it was, I really wanted to be meticulous about what I put in mind because I wanted to be able to still confidently speak about it. So the heart of everything that has been inputted into AI that comes out is the heart of me that's from the work that I've done throughout my career that I can confidently speak to it. And I think when you have someone who is just a simple, I'm going to input this data in here and then kick it out and then just copy and paste it without any additional tweaks, that's when you're able to tell, like, okay. And generally, AI usually gives you a lot of fluff anyway. Off rip, it gives you fluff anyway. So you have to find ways to defluff it.
Yeah. I was just thinking about when I did something where I asked it to write the cover letter, and I was like, okay, match what I'm doing to the missions and values of the company. And it embellished so much that I had to laugh at it. And had that moment where if I tried to speak to that, I would probably stumble all over myself because I didn't write the word.
It'll feel rehearsed,
So,
yeah, it'll feel rehearsed to a degree. So you'd have to.
It's just another talking reminded me. Oh, I think we're having.
Oh, go ahead.
I think we're having just a blurb of connection.
Yeah, there we go. We're back. We're back.
Am I back?
Yeah, you're good.
Okay. This is probably going live. Yeah, I was reminded once of when I did a resume, and I was actually interviewing, and because of what I was working on, there was like some NDA, but it was also where I had the non-disclosure piece, but it was also where I had a lot of impact. So I'm trying to word this in a way. So I was like, a project, but then when I was going in the interview, I reread my resume and I'm like, I don't know what I was talking about there. Even though I wrote it myself, I don't remember what project I'm talking about.
Yeah.
So I'm just reminding people, maybe put some notes if you have to use a little bit of vagary, which I hated in there, but how do you even get around talking about things where you had impact, but also I can't tell you what was happening under the hood here.
It's so funny because I remember I had an interview with Red Hat and I was excited about it. I used to work for IBM, so I was like, okay, I think I can get there. It was a 3-rounder and I felt confident for all of them. There was a technical component and I felt confident in that one too, but then it became a challenge because at that point, I think I was maybe 6.5 months out from work. And even though the answers that I was giving, the interviewer loved them, it was always a go deeper, go deeper, go deeper. And for me, it was like, well, dang, I've been out of it for 6 months. I don't know how much deeper I can go into it because there's so many other nuances now that at this point I haven't been around it in a while. Even though I could speak to it, confidently before, I don't know how much deeper I can go. So in situations like that, depending on how deep it is, I wouldn't necessarily have it on my resume to a degree because I wouldn't feel confident enough to like speak to it. And when it comes to like just the AI component itself, it's a good tool to use, but you have to just use it responsibly, you know?
Yes. And Fatima did comment here on that AI should be more of a template, a starting point for you to identify things that you should mention. But there is a lot of tweaking and correcting in
It's a
addition to
lot.
subtracting about it.
Yeah. One of the ways that I tweaked, so I have what I like to call it a resume bullet point bank is what I look at it as. So when I was going for, I would have my already like the bullet points that I've already written out for myself, and I would tailor each one individually to a specific component to like the job description as I'm going through it. And this is after having ChatGPT like analyze my resume to see how well. So, and that's what I mean by like keeping the humanity into your resume. So I would go through and still write everything out myself, but then ChatGPT has a faster way of making it sound better than I do. So I'll instruct it to be like, take the core of what I'm writing, but write this in a specific way that speaks to the job description, but keep everything the same. So in case I'm missing anything, you might have different verbiage that works better in this scenario. And it would do that, but I wouldn't just use that resume bullet point right away. I would just take it and store it. And then I would, find another one. So as you mentioned earlier, ChatGPT can spit out a lot of stuff. So when it does that, I would always ask it to pick out the most relevant. And then I would also ask it, hey, give me at least 1 to 10 bullet points. Pick out the top 3. What top 3 align to what I originally had? Is there a way we can consolidate this to keep the same core message of what I originally had in the first place? All right, now analyze the structure. How well does this match to the job description? And would it be beneficial to have on my resume if I were to go for this role? And if, depending on what I got from the answer, if it was a yes, then great. If it was a no, and I think this also helps too. I tell ChatGPT, talk to me like I'm your best friend that you're very like direct with. That way, if it's not going to be good, then I'll know because you'll just let me know and go from there. So I think it's so much prompting that has to go into it if you're going to use AI to help you in these things, but definitely just needs to be like an accessory tool.
I have for a while my AI I had trained it, and I guess it knew I was a nice person because everything was always, you're amazing. And I had, at one point I said, I get discouraged really easy. So I need you to be an encourager. And finally I was like, I actually need you to tell me a little bit more of like it is, because it's great for the ego, but I don't know if it's great for what I'm going for. So,
Right.
So I would like to touch on you. Clearly tweaking your resume was one of those, or I should say deep diving and learning as much about resumes was one of those high markers of success, but you still had to get to interviews. And I would like to pause just for a second that I know now you do offer to help people with their resumes and have side hustle on that. So considering how much work Brandon's done, I would say reach out to him if you're interested in having your resume reviewed. But there's my plug for what you do.
Oh, appreciate it.
But I would love to get into, okay, we have this great resume. Now I'm getting called. There's another whole part of the interview and standing out that way, especially I know that it's nerve-wracking situation by itself, but then as time goes on and the job company gets more important, or that you get really excited about, that the stakes feel higher. So I'd also love for you to talk about how you kind of keep yourself in the zone without being a frantic, or even if you started feeling desperate, because sometimes I say like, look, people may be desperate and that's why they sound or behave desperate. So I would love to hear.
It's funny because that was such a challenge initially. I've always been someone who was, confident myself. Right. So when I was laid off, my mindset was, I'm not too worried. I think I'll find something pretty quickly. And there's been plenty of times where I came very close. And I'll always say, if I was to interview with somebody, I have a feeling that I would do well enough to get to the final 2 at least. And if I don't get it, whoever got it was more deserving than I am. And I'm okay with that. I can live with it. But there were moments where, so the first month after the layoff, I wasn't I wasn't stressed out really. Second and third, not as much, but fourth, that's when severance is starting to go a little bit. Month 5 comes in, and now, I've had these conversations where how do you make sure you don't sound too desperate in the interview? And then because they might pick up on that and it could be a huge, like, okay, well, we don't know if we want to go with this person. Um, Honestly, one of the ways that I would get ready, I would watch ESPN right before an interview. And I would either do that, I would listen to R&B music right before an interview, whatever I could to calm my nerves down, because as confident as I was on interviews before the layoff, every time an interview would come up after the layoff, I would get those like butterflies, or, I'd have to go to the bathroom real quick or grab water. I'd get hot immediately. So I have to cut the AC on or something like that. Or I would just have music playing in the background, something to keep me, tame. And I would just tell myself, it's all right. Look at it like this. I'm interviewing them also. They're interviewing me to see if it's a good fit. I'm going to be interviewing them to see if it's a good fit as well. So that helped me come with whatever questions I might have in the interview. And just from experience, and I've been told by some interviewers or recruiters, not everybody has questions for them. And when they do, sometimes it's just about like simple stuff. It might not always be about the business, but each job that I've interviewed at, or each company I've interviewed at, they love the personal questions if you sprinkle them in there. They love the questions of when you talk about the impact you could potentially have, or a problem that you could potentially have, to help solve with them. So trying to stay in that mind. I think one interview I watched The Lion King right before I got into the interview, and I felt fantastic afterwards. So just making sure you're like loose and confident, I think that's really important to kind of get rid of some of those nerves.
I love that, especially the idea of, hey, what makes you feel good in the moment?
Exactly.
I talk to people who have been through rounds of interviews, and it's almost like it just starts impacting going into that next one, the mental mindset of,
Mhm.
oh, I'm just going to get rejected again. And the idea of watching something like The Lion King ahead of time, or just, I'd probably listen to Broadway music or something, just some of my favorites to loosen me up. I love that. I love that. That's a great tip.
So much, because I would tell my wife and my friends, like, what my day looks like on a day-to-day basis. I wake up, I do my morning devotional, and then I check my email to see if I might have missed something. And then I'm immediately on LinkedIn looking at what job postings came out. Okay, do I need to tweak my resume today? And I mentioned earlier at the call, for me, I wanted to really focus on upskilling to get to where I wanted to go. So like, I knew I'm in the project management space, or I guess project management, program management space. So I knew, okay, you got the experience, might as well get your PMP. I think at the time I was going for the CAPM, and it was being covered through my company at the time, right before the layoff. And then when I was getting ready to go for the exam, I was like, oh man, this stuff feels kind of easy. I think I'm gonna just take a chance on the PMP and just go for it. And I didn't study for it as long as I would have liked to. Um, my wife was also in school for her PhD, so we had to deal with that. My daughter, we were taking care of hers at the time, so it was tough trying to schedule time to study and whatnot. So I only studied like officially for 2 weeks for the PMP, and I was like, I'm just gonna wing it and go for the exam. So I took the exam and I passed it on the first time, and I felt good about it. And I was like, I was stressed out because it's a very expensive thing to do. And I'm like, money's already funny because of the layoff. So I don't know if I want to do this or not, but let me just go ahead and do it anyway. And then once I did that, going for that license wasn't even it was because I saw this on a lot of the jobs that I was going for. This is what I think I could have to help me stand out. Now that I've accomplished that, let me tap into AI and data, because that's where it seems like everything is going now. So let me work on some licenses for that too. And then I got my generative AI licenses. And then there was AWS. Let me tap into that also, and Azure. So I got my certs in those too. And after I got my certs in those, it was a lot of LinkedIn learnings. I would just repost every last one that I did. And that helped me stand out even more so, because now you're starting to see. And when it came to, like I said, I was very aggressive about Microsoft. I'm going to get there one day. Don't know when it's going to happen, but check this out. I'm tagging everybody who's in Microsoft. I ended up joining the Power Apps program, or the Power Up program, and got certified with Power Apps. So it was like I felt comfortable with the licenses that I had. And I think focusing on the upskilling for the first month of the layoff kind of distracted me. And when I look in hindsight, though, I often do tell people I probably didn't process it the best way. I maybe gave myself a day to process the layoff, and then I was like laser focused on everything else because I felt like I had to be. But then I want to say around Thanksgiving time, that's where it like really started to hit, where we have family coming over, and I'm trying my best to keep it together, and I'm struggling, and my mom sees it, my brother-in-law sees it, and the whole time I'm like, why are y'all staring at me? And they tell me like later, we can tell that you're like really going through it, because mentally I was starting to get beat down just from all the rejections that came through. And I told myself, hey, you're never going to like look at how many applications you apply for until I did it. And then when I did, I was like, oh, why'd you do that? Because now you see the number, and it just made it feel that much worse. Because I think at that time it was like 1,800 or something like that. And I was like, dang, that's a lot of places that I've applied to. But it took a former colleague of mine to tell me, well, look at it like this. There might be other people who applied to more. You've interviewed at about 10 different companies, though, which is better than a lot of your peers, because some are having a hard time getting 2 or 3. So that made me change my perspective a little bit when it came to continuously trying to navigate through the job market.
Yeah, I know somebody in my circles applied for 2,200, and they're having a hard time just getting a call back at all. And the discouragement that you can see and feel, and it resonates. It's sometimes it's hard to be a helper in this environment, but I do love that you brought up that you upskilled, that you did something else. In fact, and the processing of the layoff, because I had the same day I was laid off, I put the open to work post on LinkedIn, and I had to take it down within 24 hours. It was actually overwhelming. And I realized that I hadn't decompressed from the stress of the job. There was so much I hadn't done to take care of my own mental space then.
Right.
And using this time now to try something like this podcast and do something that still feels very goal oriented, and stretching myself has been such a maybe lifesaver in this, because there are days when I'm like, I don't have a job anymore, and it just hits in the soul that I have to do some work on, to be like, okay, that doesn't mean you're not valuable. It doesn't mean you're not loved, or that the very creator of the world looks down on you with favor. So
exactly. It was such a challenge. I had a conversation with it's a lady I met on LinkedIn, and we become good friends. And I told her I would get a lot of messages from people, because I would post a lot. I was very intentional about posting, but I tried to keep it very vulnerable, positive, honest, and document the journey to an extent. And it's funny, I used to say I wasn't going to be the guy to make a post that says, when I finally got a job, oh, well, it's been X amount of days, and these are the amount of jobs I applied to. I still ended up doing that at the end, but it wasn't it wasn't for me. It was more so for others, just to kind of say like, hey, it's still possible. And I would get a lot of messages that would say, hey, I really appreciate the positivity that you're sharing. I'm going through this currently. And my thought process was, I feel like I have to post these positive messages, because if I don't, then I'm going to find myself being very, very negative. And I don't want that, because if that happens, then I'm not going to be able to do the things that I need to do, because I'm just going to be too down in the dumps. As my best friend would like to say, I'd be a Debbie Downer. So I didn't want to do that. So it was a whole bunch that had to go into it.
Yeah, it resonates so much. That's how I started the live mentorship call that I do. Is I was actually at a low point myself, and it was, I have to give back in some way. And I do advise people, if they're getting into Debbie Downer land, or if they're just completely feeling despair or nothing will change, then just look for someone to help. But I also wanted to touch on, I have become complete fans of people who go out there and just document the job search, even if it's hard. Some have been even cantankerous about it, and they end up with this following still, because people start rooting for them, or they start seeing a picture into what does the job search world look like today. And that sort of authenticity resonates, even if there were times I'm like, I don't know if that looks good to the employers out there, but he landed. And then he posted for quite a while about how appreciative of just having the role. He had done a boot camp to get into coding, so it was very much this was a life-changing job. I don't see him as much as anymore because of simply he now is busy in that job. And but when he does, I usually am like, oh, good to see your post today. How are you?
Yeah.
And because he made a fan out of me just by posting the journey. So what would you speak to anybody who's afraid to just kind of put themselves out there a little bit?
Honestly, I would say just do it. Do the things that make you afraid. I'm not really a person who's going to be like, I'm always going to be honest with people and just open and vulnerable, but I'm not necessarily that guy that's going to put it out there, and just by putting it out there, it opened so many doors for me in turn, like when I was going through the layoff period, because I would get people that would message me and say, hey, your story resonates with me. Check these jobs out. And I never spoke with them before a day of my life. Or it would be, I've met a few managers who have been amazing where they'll reach out and say, hey, I saw your post. This really got to me. Here's a job opening here. Apply for it. And if it gets pulled, I'll be the one interviewing you, and so on. I've had it happen with recruiters. You just never know how your story can touch somebody. And I didn't think that I was, when I was posting everything that I was posting, I didn't realize how many people that it was reaching, and how many people that it was giving hope to. So hearing all the feedback in my messages, it just made me continue to go. And I was like, well, if they're getting motivated by this, then I have no choice but to be motivated myself, because now I'm going to be doing myself a disservice, I feel like. But you just never know who your story is going to impact. So if it frightens you to put yourself out there in the job market, to put your story out there, I would just encourage you to do it. Sometimes doing the things that scare you the most ends up helping you grow the most, at the end. So
you are speaking my language so much. And so much of that is I went through so much in life, and truly I'm in a lot of therapy for it. But it's almost like when I start feeling afraid, that's a signal that that's the thing I should do, because it's my brain saying, oh, let's keep you safe. And that doesn't mean that it's not valuable or worth pursuing. It's just our brain trying to make sure we don't harm ourselves. But when we do it anyway, it starts getting easier because of your brain realizes this is not the thing that's going to end us.
Right. One of the things I've learned about that, like when you're scared, I call it the healthy fear to a degree. If you're scared, it lets you know that you care about it. So if you're putting yourself out there, you're showing that you're putting your care out there as well. I'd be concerned if you weren't scared, like afraid of it at all, because at that point you have to look within and say, well, how do I really feel about trying to land something, or, given the situations and stuff. So if you can put just a hint of vulnerability out there, it signals to anyone else, or it should signal to anyone else, that, hey, this person cares about what's going on. And I think that's what, the people I've connected with on LinkedIn, that's what they were able to get from a lot of the story. Even now, I've been employed for 7 months now, and I still get messages of, hey, your story was phenomenal. I love seeing like the way that you approached it from your layoff to where you are now. And I'd be remiss if I didn't name drop again Andrea and Gwen. And Andrea works at AMD, and Gwen, she's at Microsoft. And without those two, like, they were a huge support system. They would not let me hold my head low. If I did, I got a very, very impactful mouthful about it. There's also a friend of mine named Sandy. She was the same way. And, having people who could uplift you is like you built community while you were in the layoff period. And I've been fortunate to be able to build community with a lot of people that's helped me get to where I am now. Shanae being a huge support, Jean being a huge support, Christina being a huge support. You were a huge support. I met you in the mentorship live as well. So, you just never know the type of impact you can have just from letting your voice be heard.
Yeah, just showing up. I think you might have been on the call where I was kind of feeling like, I don't know if we're reaching anybody or something. And were you there? And you're like, you have no idea how much just showing up matters. And
exactly,
I needed to hear that. And sometimes I think we forget that the people who are putting it out there and who are like even creating content, all of those things, I can get so discouraged sometimes. I'm like, and I have to coach myself too, because I'm like, man, only 100 people even saw that post. I'm like, excuse me, ma'am, if you were standing in front of 100 people, you would have a completely different reaction than trying to discount what is happening and how much impact
exactly
in those moments. So thank you for that, by the way, for being there.
No problem.
When I was like, why am I here?
Everybody has a story. And my biggest thing, as someone who as you know, this would have been my second layoff. The first one I don't necessarily count because the job market was way different at that time. But this one was like my first where I was just uncertain if anything was going to happen or not. And I know that there are a lot of people who have uncertainty when it comes, to the job market. Are things going to get better? Am I going to find something? When I was going through it, I did not like when people would tell me, "Don't worry, things are going to get better. You'll land something." It used to set me off so bad. I would still receive it, but it would just be one of those things where it's like internally, I know this already. That's not the thing that's going to, get me out of the funk that I'm in, though, because now my mind's going to immediately wander to win. So I think focus on the things that you can control for yourself. At the end of the day, your mental health is still going to be important. Support people around you. That's still going to be important as well. Being intentional, I think that's the thing that's going to help you as you're going through, whether that's showing up to networking events, reaching out for coffee chats, being intentional with how you interact or how you engage with people on LinkedIn or outside of LinkedIn. I had to really get out of my comfort zone. I am a talker, I will admit, but I'm an introverted talker. And my peers will say, "Oh, no, he's extroverted or he's ambiverted," or whatever. But I have no problem putting myself out there now. Before I would go out, like I've done virtual career fairs, I've done in person. Like when I was in the layoff period, I went to the grocery store and I saw somebody who worked at a company that I wanted to go to. And I was like, I see this person every Friday. I'm going to go, spark a conversation just to be out of curiosity. And we had a great conversation about their company, things that you can do to stand out. And then that came a referral opportunity as well from them. So, also trying to, and the thing is too, I did try to go for referrals throughout the layoff period. None of the roles that I've applied for that I was interviewed for, none of those came off of referrals. Those were just direct. A referral would have been great, but those are just direct through the company portal. But the ones that I did go to, this is a huge shout out to my friend Michael. He works with NetApp. He was like with me through day one of just like, hey, here's a job if you hadn't seen it. Here's one if you hadn't seen it. Very pivotal. The support was great. And when it comes to the referrals, I would even search, like do the Boolean searches on LinkedIn, and you would find people who would be willing to offer them. But I found that it was just better to build a personal connection first with somebody. And then, maybe after a good chance of getting to know the person, let them be the one to initiate the referral thing, as opposed to you bringing it up, because you don't want to feel like you just have an agenda at the end of the day, even though we do. But you want to still be able to build that relationship. I have a friend named Thomas that works with Microsoft, and we don't just talk about Microsoft things. We talk about Marvel. We talk about our kids and stuff like that. So just being able to build the relationships, the intentionality that comes from that will help take you a long way.
Yeah, I see sometimes on LinkedIn, people are like, "Don't make LinkedIn Facebook. Don't put pictures of your dogs or your, I don't know, half marathons or whatever." And I kind of roll my eyes at that, because you mentioned it even in writing your resume. We're humans. We have our hobbies and our goals and our dreams and our discouragements, all of these things. Don't take the humanity out of who you are. And even in some of as I'm challenging myself on other social media platforms, I have to gamify it a lot to say, okay, what is my goal here? And what would be success on this post? And I'm putting it some, what I call goofy content, but it's fun, and it's bringing people into the circle that I would never meet otherwise without posting about how I'm trying to befriend crows, which I know is ridiculous, but you know what? So is Jacqueline. And if you come along with the ride of learning who I am, you're going to learn that.
You just gotta be your unapologetic, authentic self is how I look at it. And, I feel like that's just the best way you can be. And you put whatever it is of yourself into the things that you're hoping to get out of it. It really goes a long way.
So we are getting close to time, and I would love for you to, I probably haven't asked something that maybe you would love to talk about. So if there is anything in that you would love to be like, "Oh, we forgot to mention this. Here's an opportunity." I'll pause.
I'd say if anyone's interested and you want me to take a look at your resume, I'm more than happy to do that. I also do career coaching now too, and I feel good enough about that just from years of going through. That's what made me confident about interviews in the first place. Was I used to do career stuff at my previous job. So when it comes to that, if you want to like advice or anything, feel free to reach out to me. I tell people I'm a 2 minutes or less type of guy. So if you message me, that's going to be the time window for the response, 2 minutes or less, because I want to make sure I'm being attentive to people because somebody was attentive to me as well. And the last thing that I would say is difficult as it is to, have hope when in a job market where it feels like there's none, it's still a light at the end of the tunnel and that's the one thing I had to hold on to. I had my faith, and then I had my friends and family that could help me, go forward. And regardless of how dark it got, there was always some type of light at the end of it. It just took me being patient to see it. And that was something internally that I had a hard time dealing with, was the patience, because it's like, I don't, life is telling me that I can't be patient right now because I have a 4-month-old to look out for, because I have a family to support and things like that. But the patience is what helped me get to where I am now. And the peers that I have who've been able to land jobs, they've been able to get there. And like, I had a conversation with my friend Andrea yesterday about, it's funny how a year ago we were in this situation and now it's come full circle because we were intentional, we were patient, and we just didn't give up. So my encouragement to you all is just not to give up on your story.
I bet day one after that employment gap was just the sweetest thing, wasn't it?
Yeah. Yeah, for sure. Just, keep moving and you'll keep moving in the right direction.
Sure. And is LinkedIn the best place for people to reach out to you, or do you have other platforms that you are?
LinkedIn's the best place to reach out. I'm very personable, so I'm on Instagram, and I tell people, if you ask me to work on your resume, I usually just give you my phone number and email. And then at that point, after I work on it for you, if you need anything, I'm a phone call away or I'm a text message away. My wife dislikes it because my phone goes off a lot, but I'm like, hey, it is what it is. I've just been put on this earth to be able to help people. And that's what that's one of the gifts that I have. So I want to be able to, share that with the world.
Yeah, I love that. And that's, I'm sure, one of the ways we connected is just helpers tend to find helpers and keep on keeping on. So thank you for being here. I have loved this conversation. I'd probably, I don't know, we should have you back at some point just to talk about the career side of, what have people learned? I was the worst at office politics because I kind of confused authenticity with just saying whatever was on my mind. Lessons learned there. So thank you for being here, and
Thank you for having me.
The time. This has been a wonderful conversation. Yeah, I can't wait till we connect. I continue our building a relationship on LinkedIn, and I encourage other people to reach out to either one of us if you need something, and we will do what we can to.
Thank you. Great conversation, everybody. Hope you all have a good one.
Yes. Thanks for those participating on chat too. I appreciate you doing that.